Hi, my name is Grace, and I am from Houston, Texas, and I'm a staff member with Chi Alpha at Rice University in Houston. Since I was born and raised in Houston and then stayed in Houston for college, I knew I wanted to stay plugged in with my home church, which was a Chinese bilingual church in Houston, but I figured it would be good to meet other Christians on campus anyway, and so my roommate and I, freshman year, checked out all the different campus ministries, and we had met some people who were part of Chi Alpha, and so I remember checking it out. And even though I checked out so many campus ministries, but there was just something about Chi Alpha that challenged me in my faith and challenged me to live out my faith in a way I never before. And I also just found such good community and built the strongest friendships I made at Rice, and so decided to stick with Chi Alpha. So when I was a student and got involved with Chi Alpha, became a small group leader, God just worked in and through my life in such crazy ways, and so much of it was just through the fellowship I had in Chi Alpha that it was just such a big part of my life. And one of my closest friends and my co-leader in Chi Alpha was going to do the internship after graduation, so I was really torn about whether to do that as well or to go down the track of teaching. And so I was like, oh, I should pray about it and ask God to see what He wants to say, what He thinks is right for me to do. And long story short, I ended up hearing Him tell me to go to Taiwan and live with my grandparents, which was not either of the options I was giving Him, but I decided to trust God and obey Him and ended up living in Taiwan for a little over a year. In that time, I got to spend what ended up being the last year of my grandpa's life on earth with him, and also got to see my grandma come to Jesus and get baptized. So it was just so crazy. And so when I came back to Houston, I was like, okay, God, obviously you know what's up. So I would be an idiot not to just ask you what's next. And so it was kind of back to square one. And when I was seeking God, I just felt like this time around He was telling me to do the Chi Alpha internship. And honestly, I didn't have aspirations initially to become a missionary or a campus missionary, but I just knew that He was right the last time I asked Him, and so I had to obey Him. And so I decided to do the internship, and 4 years later, here I still am, and I think it's still the best job ever, and I'm so grateful to be doing what I'm doing. Being Asian American, Asian parents definitely value security and comfort and stability for their kids, because obviously that's what's good for them. Kind of with that though, I think a lot of times in Asian Christian culture, the idols of financial security and success can become hindrances to obeying God's will, especially if He's telling you to serve Him full time. And so even though my parents actually at this point had gone into full-time ministry with my home church, they still didn't want that for me. They were like, oh, why don't you first just get financially stable and make money and save money, and then later when you retire, serve God full time. Yeah, so they weren't exactly super for it at first. And it was really hard because I'm the oldest of 5 kids, responsible, oldest daughter, and I've always taken really seriously, the commandment to honor my parents. And so this was the first time I think I was making a major decision that felt like they weren't super supportive of and they didn't completely understand. But I'm just so thankful that God was so faithful that in my really honest prayers with Him, I was like, okay, God, if you really want me to do this, you have to change their hearts. You have to open their eyes to this. And He really did. Now they're my biggest supporters, and I'm just so grateful. I think one of the things that was kind of a staple in my home church background as a Chinese church was eating together. Whenever the Sunday service was done, we would stay at church and have a potluck lunch together. And that just seemed to make sense. And so I think that's something that for me that's always been such a staple in how I spend time with students, is a lot of times over meal times, getting boba together, getting food together. And also my parents, I think, really modeled well hospitality in a way that even, I remember when I was a student, over break times, my parents would be like, oh, let's invite Chi Alpha staff and other people in Chi Alpha over. I think in a similar way, I've tried to replicate that in my relationships with my students and just inviting them into my homes and making sure there's food at every single meeting, every single time we meet up, and also exercising that generosity and just paying for people's meals. I'm super grateful that when I was a student, even though the Chi Alpha staff was all white, but they were, again, just because of a real relationship and real fellowship we had with one another, I knew they loved me. And whenever there was anything I talked about discussed concerning my culture or my family, they were always so honoring, and they always really highlighted what are the kingdom culture elements of my background, of my culture. That experience as a student made me realize how valued my perspective was, especially if it's an underrepresented perspective or background. And if we want to fully reflect God in his infinite kind of dynamic character, then we need different perspectives in the mix. And if you feel like there aren't many of you, there's not many of you, and that you kind of stick out or that you're underrepresented, that actually makes you that much more important when it comes to making sure the body of Christ is fully representing God. And so I don't really see it as you don't fit in. I see it as like it's that much more important that your presence is here so that we can give God the glory he's worthy of. My name is Grace, and I am sent.